Well, good morning and welcome to SouthPoint Church. We are so glad that you're with us this morning. We're one church in two locations. So I want to say good morning to Leonardtown. Is anyone fired up to be here this morning? I want to say good morning to our Lusby campus. We're so glad that you're here with us today. And so we're in week 3 of our series called Mad World, Living Sane in a Crazy World. And so listen, here's the good news. If you've missed any of these, if you missed week 1 and week 2, you can go onto our website, you can go onto our YouTube channel, and you can watch the messages and catch up. And so as we start this series this week and kind of go into week 3, I'm going to do something that's a little bit dangerous. A matter of fact, it's a little bit dangerous because after week 1, someone sent me an email. And it's an anonymous email. And typically, if someone sends me an email, I'll typically respond and say, hey, how can I help you? But somebody sent me an email, and it was kind of an interesting email because the email was about what they thought about the message. And what was kind of funny was week 1's message was kind of a time where I was vulnerable. Remember, I said, we asked the question, what's wrong with the world? And I said, I am. And we said, we are. You know, what the madness starts with us, right? And because we all go kind of, listen, I might miss out, so I need to look out for me regardless to you. And so I told a story. Now, here's the thing. I told a story of someone who was flipping me off and who cussed at me. And I didn't flip them off or I didn't cuss them back. I just simply told a story about someone doing that to me and my response to them. And that sometimes the reaction is what causes the madness. And here's what's amazing. The person that emailed me missed the whole point of the message. The message was, what's wrong with the world? Me, us, like to look inward, like to focus. Like, matter of fact, I'm going to read you what this person wrote. Matter of fact, and they didn't just say it once, they said it twice. Here's what they wrote. And I would have actually emailed them or called them or talked to them if it hadn't been anonymous, just let them know I would be saying this today. But it says the speaker was making jokes about cursing in the message. I never joked about it. I just simply said, hey, this would happen. And that wasn't enough. They said, listen, we're not coming back. Listen, they're not coming back, and here's why they're not coming back to SouthPoint Church. We don't find cursing to be funny and think that it's something mature Christians should avoid. And I didn't say you should cuss. I just simply told a true story. And they're not coming back, and they were so focused on the fact that I had mentioned that someone cussed, that they were offended, and they missed the whole point of the message. And when I got that and read that, I started to laugh. I just kind of chuckled. And then there's a part of me, I don't know if this has ever happened to you, like I just wanted to be mad. And I wanted to write some things, but I never do that. I just realized that just adds to the mad. We already talked about that, right? And so as I was thinking about this, I wanted to get mad. I want to be mad. But you know why I'm not mad? And why I wasn't mad when I saw the email that they said, I can't believe you talked about cussing in your message. And I realized here's the reason I couldn't be mad. It's because I've done the exact same thing before. I mean, come on. I've done the exact same thing where I've been so focused on fixing someone else's stuff that I forget to realize that I have some brokenness in my own life. And it got me thinking, I mean, come on. Have you ever been so fixated on correcting someone else that you kind of miss maybe some faults that you have? Like, maybe not in this crew, but maybe you know someone like that. Maybe it's not you. Maybe you know someone like that. Come on, maybe this has ever happened. Have you ever gotten like mad at a coworker, right? And then one of your friends comes to you and said, "Why are you mad at them? They're just doing what you do." And you go, "Ooh, that hurts. It doesn't feel good, right?" Have you ever been angry? Have you ever like been angry at your spouse and they're like, "Why are you angry at me?" And you're like, "Well, because you told me this," and then you discover later that they just told you a truth that you didn't want to hear. And then here's the coup de grace. Here's the one that just gets us, especially, anybody got kids? Raise your hands if you got kids. This is the one, I'm telling you, this is the one we've all experienced, right? Have you ever been upset at your kid? Have you ever been upset at your kid for doing something, and then all of a sudden you realize they're doing what you do? Oh. Right, am I the only parent that's ever happened to? Like, if it is, I'm just a bad parent then, apparently. But, like, has that ever happened? And here's what we discover. As a matter of fact, it leads us to our opening truth this morning. Listen, trying to fix, and we're going to put it up on the screen, trying to fix what surrounds us before we change what's inside of us just escalates the problem. Trying to fix what surrounds us before we change what's on the inside of us just escalates the problem. Here I was talking in the start of this series that what's wrong with the world starts with us. And the only thing this person could think about was that I told a story where someone cussed at me and I didn't even cuss back. And they missed the whole point because they were so focused on trying to fix what was around them, they didn't look on the inside. And there's two serious problems when we try to fix what surrounds us before we try to change or address what's on the inside of us. And it's a serious problem for two reasons. Here's what I discovered. Listen. You can't change the unchangeable. It'll drive you crazy. You can't change the unchangeable. It will drive you crazy. Have you ever tried to fix something that's unfixable? It's just aggravating. It is. Now listen, this is some free advice to all the people who are dating. This is free advice to all those who are engaged or about to be married, or if you're single and you're thinking about getting married. Maybe you're already married, but this is free. You don't have to put anything extra in the offering, but this is free. Listen, here's what I discovered. You can't change people that don't want to be changed. Listen, if you're dating someone or you're married to someone, you're thinking about dating someone and you're going, I'm going to change them once we get married. Just ask a married person how that worked for them. Listen, you can't change people that don't want to be changed. And here's why it's a serious problem. Listen, think about all the time, all the energy, all the effort we put in trying to change people that don't want to be changed. It goes to waste. It's a waste of your time. It's a waste of your energy. It's a waste of my time. It's a waste of my energy. We just waste our time and energy trying to change others when we can't change them. And here's what makes it worse, is it's painful. It's painful and it's frustrating. But here's the second part of the serious problem. We literally miss the greatest opportunity to create change when we focus on others. Because we can't control others. We can't change other people that don't want to be changed, but there is one person that we can change if we give that same time and attention and effort that we gave to others. Who do you think that is? We could actually change and create some real value, you. I see everyone's fired up today, man. Everyone's like, oh, I'm so excited that you're telling me this, Pastor Matt, right? See, the reality is the reason it's a serious problem is we'll just waste our time and energy because you can't change people that don't want to be changed, and so you just be frustrated, right? And then you also miss the opportunity to change or create change in the one place that your time and effort will actually give results in yourself. But it leaves me asking a question, and this is a question that we all know, that we think about, but we never want to say out loud, and it goes like this. We know we can't change people. So why do you and I continue to try to change people and miss the opportunity to change ourselves? Why do we live like that? Especially church people. Smile, turn to your neighbor with a little smile. Why do we always do that? Why do people in general go, listen, I know that trying to change you doesn't work, and I don't want to change me, and so why do we continue to do something that we know wastes our time, our energy, our effort? We know it causes us pain. Why do we continue to do that? Now, this is one of those moments at SouthPoint Church we say, buckle up, because this is an honest truth that none of us like, but it's so true. And here's the thing. As I wrote it, I didn't like it. I don't like it when I think it. You're not going to like it when I say it. Here's the truth. Here's why we'll continue to try to change other people when we know it doesn't work. It's because it is always easier and cheaper to complain and try to control people than it is to pay the price to create change in our own lives. Right? I mean, can we, this is church, right? And we're supposed to be honest in church, right? If we are really honest, the reason we like to complain, the reason we don't mind trying to attempt to control other people, even though we know it doesn't work, even though we know it's a waste of our time and energy, is because it's easier to complain, it's easier to try to control others than it is to actually pay the price to see change in our own lives. But here's the problem. 1, it doesn't work. 2, it wastes our time and energy. 3, we miss an opportunity to experience change. And we just escalate the problem. We don't solve anything. We just make the problem worse. We add to the mad. And so if you and I want to stop wasting our time and our energy, if you and I want to stop experiencing that frustrating pain of not being able to change others, if you and I actually want to get a return for our energy and our efforts of investing our time and our energy in something that will create change, we need to look on the inside. So how do we live differently so that we don't waste our time and we don't add to the matter? How do we do that? Now here's the great news this morning. You and I don't have to figure that out by ourselves. Matter of fact, you and I aren't the first people to deal with this. God knew this would be an issue. Matter of fact, Jesus himself addresses this very issue of trying to fix what surrounds us before we change what's inside us. It just escalates the problem. Matter of fact, even if you didn't go to church, in one of Jesus' most famous messages, they call it the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus is speaking not only to his disciples, but he's speaking to a crowd of people. And we're going to pick it up in the eyewitness account of the Gospel of Matthew. We're going to put it up here on the screen. It's Matthew 7, 3 through 5. And Jesus says, and why worry about a speck in your friend's eye when you have a log in your own eye? He's saying, come on. Listen, why are you worried about something that is barely wrong with someone else when you have a major injury in your eye? And he goes on to say, how can you think of saying to your friend, let me help you get rid of that speck in your eye when you can't see past the log in your own eye? He says, listen, how is it that what kind of perception do you have that you go, I want to help somebody else, but I haven't even worked on me yet? How could you even begin to do that? What is your thinking behind that? And then he goes on to say, hypocrite. See, Jesus is a truth teller. Jesus says when we don't work on our own stuff and we go to attempt to work on somebody else's stuff, that just makes us a false actor. We're like the person who wants to be the doctor because we stayed at the hotel that night. First, get rid of the log in your own eye, then you will see well enough to deal with the speck in your friend's eye. Jesus is saying, listen, before you try to change what's around you, why don't you try to work a little bit what's on the inside of you before you go on what's on the outside of you? And so this morning, here's what I'd like to do, just briefly, because I can tell this is such a popular subject with everyone this morning. I want to briefly make 3 observations that we won't waste our time and our energy and effort that Jesus tells us that will bring change in our lives and the world that we live in, so that you and I don't have to add to the mad. Because Jesus tells us that when you and I complain and try to control, we just waste our time when we focus on fixing the outside before we adjust any change on the inside. So here's observation number 1. Jesus says, without reflection, we end up with severe blind spots that are dangerous and harmful. Without reflection, we end up with severe blind spots that are dangerous and harmful. You know what's amazing is Jesus is speaking to the audience. He says, listen, everyone has some kind of issue, right? He says either you have a log or a speck. And so Jesus is telling us a truth that we all know. Listen, I don't care how great your family is, how great your life is, how good you are, or how, somewhere in the middle, or how bad your life was, or how bad your parents were. Listen, all of us have some kind of brokenness in our life. Jesus says, listen, you'll either have a speck or a log, but everyone's got something, right? Everyone's got something. And when you don't deal with your something first before you go to address somebody else, you become dangerous. You become harmful. And here's why. Think about it. I'm going to give you kind of an example. How many of you remember, like, the bad pollen in the summer when it wasn't raining early in the summer? Anybody remember the bad pollen? Like, do you remember when you go out in the morning and you go out and your windshield looks like there's just this yellow, like, coat of dust on your windshield? Anybody remember that? And so here's what happened. My windshield wiper squirters, the thing that's, the fluid on the windshield wipers to clean it off, those were busted early summer. And so what happened is the pollen would fall, and I have all these trees where I live, right? So all this yellow, sticky pollen overnight would fall on my car. And because the temperature dropped, there would be dew. And so I'd get to my car and I would try to hit the windshield wiper, little, shooty thing to put the fluid on there to clean off. And there would be nothing would come out. And the windshield wipers would wipe it. And I couldn't see out the windshield. You know what I had to do? I literally had to take a bottle of water, open my window and go like this and then do the windshield wipers. And you know why I did that? Because, listen, I understood that if I tried to drive down the road when I couldn't see, I would be dangerous to myself and dangerous to... who would get in a car and try to drive it when you can't see clearly? And most of us would go, nobody would. That's moronic, right? We'd all go, no, don't do that. That's unsafe. Let me ask a question. How many of us can't see clearly the own brokenness in our own lives, and we're trying to go through life telling other people how to live? We're trying to direct our own life with brokenness. We're trying to direct other people's life with brokenness. It's like we're going through life and we haven't addressed our own brokenness we can't see, and we're going through life and we're causing damage everywhere we go. Damage to ourselves and damage to the people that we love. Jesus says, listen, if you don't address what's in your own life, this is a vision problem. Until you address what's going on inside of you, there's no way for you to be able to see clearly to fix someone else. This is a vision issue. How can we begin to ask someone else to change when we're unwilling to take a look at our own life and see what's busted and broken and what needs to be changed in us? How could we ever see clearly for others if we haven't addressed our own brokenness. Jesus says when you try to do that, we just become hypocrites with really bad vision that go around damaging each other. And none of us should want that. When we do that, we just add to the mad. Jesus says, start with you before you ever think about talking to anyone else. Check yourself. How can you not look at your own life? What is accumulated on the windshield of your life? What's accumulated on the windshield of your soul and who you are? Have you taken any time to have some reflection on that, to actually look at yourself, not at the world, and go, what percentage of this problem do I own? Like, where am I wrong? Where's my brokenness that I need to address? Because if I don't do that as I go through life, I can't see clearly, and I'm just going to run into things, and I'm going to ruin things, and I'm going to be damaging to myself and others. Which leads me to observation number 2, which says, our attitudes and actions are driven by the condition of our heart. Listen, many of us, we play religion. We play religion. We want to have behavior modification. We want to change the outside, but really never change the inside. And the problem isn't what's on the outside, it's what's on the inside. Because listen, this is a truth that I need everyone here. Whatever is on the inside will eventually show up on the outside. And that's not what I had to say, that's what Jesus has to say. Matter of fact, Jesus is speaking to a group of people, and they're a little bit offended at Jesus because his disciples haven't washed their hands, and they might be eating some bacon, and so they're offended. You haven't followed the rules, the religious do's and don't. Either you're supposed to raise your hand or not raise your hand. You didn't use the King James. You didn't jump through the religious hoops, and so Jesus is speaking to a group of people. We're going to pick it up in the eyewitness account. We're going to put it on the screen of Matthew a little bit later. Then Jesus called out the crowd, and he said, "Come and hear. Listen," he said, "and try to understand. It's not what goes into your mouth that defiles you. You are defiled by the words that come out of your mouth." And what he's saying, listen, it's not the food that you take in. It's not did you follow the dietary restrictions. It's not did you do the religious hoops. It's what comes out from the inside of you that defiles you. And he goes on to say, and his disciples asked him about that. And Jesus explains to him, he says, listen, anything you eat passes through the stomach and then goes into the sewer. He says, listen, your food comes in and it goes out. But the words you speak come from what's the word? The things that we say, the things that we post, the things that we tweet, they come from the inside. That's what defiles you. That's what wrecks you. That's what's wrong. He goes on to say, for from the heart, it's what's on the inside that comes out on the outside. The outside isn't the problem. If you change the inside, the outside will fix itself. From the heart come evil thoughts, murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, lying, and slander. Jesus is saying, listen, you guys are missing the point. Don't do a paint job. Work on the inside. Because it's on the inside that counts, and eventually the inside will show up on the outside. I want to give you an example. I remember one time my family and I, we were on vacation. I forget we were on vacation, but my daughters were kind of, I don't know, maybe somewhere between 9 and 13-ish. I was somewhere there. And we went to this place that had like a bunch of go-kart tracks. And I love go-karts. I love racing. That was a lot of fun. My girls were a little bit nervous, and my wife was like, hey, be nice and don't be a jerk when you're out there driving, right? Have fun. And I remember when I go to a go-kart track, I love racing, and it's just fun because you can bump. It says no bumping, but yeah, end up, it was an accident, right? And I go like this, right? And so I love go-karts, but I don't know if you've ever noticed when you go to a go-kart track and you get on the little thing and you're in line waiting to get, all the go-karts they all look the same. They're all like just little miniature versions of themselves. It's like they're all the same except for like the colors or the names on them, but they all look exactly the same. But if you're really smart, what you do is you get at the end of the line and then you watch, because there's always one or two go-karts that are, you guys are so smart. There are a couple of go-karts that are always faster even though they look the same. Because just because they look the same on the outside doesn't mean they're the same on the... And Jesus says it's what's on the inside that makes us broken. It's not did you raise your hand or the party you voted for or the house that you bought or the version of the Bible you read. He says it's not the religious do's and don'ts. It's your heart. And here's what I discovered. A heart is made up of three things, and we're going to put it up here on the screen. Your heart is made up of who do you trust? Remember we did this week 1? Either we're going to ask the world to bend us because the only person we can trust is ourselves. If I don't take care of me, no one else will, so world bend to me. And if I say that and you say that, conflict is inevitable. It is going to happen. So our heart is made up of who do we trust? Do we trust ourselves, or do we believe there's a God who's actually for us? How do we believe? Do we believe that there's no God and that we're just accidents? Do we believe that God doesn't care? Do we believe that God doesn't see? Do we believe that God will someday fix everything? How do we believe? And what is it that we value? You know, human beings have a real problem. We love things and use people versus loving people and using things. So as we look at our heart, we go, who do we trust? How do we believe? And what do we value? And I promise, your attitudes and actions will always reflect what's going on the inside. You can put all the religious, you can put all the morality on the side of it, but eventually whatever's on the inside will come out. This is why I always tell people who experience emotional and spiritual and physical trauma, you need to get well, because if you don't get well, whatever brokenness is inside of you will come out, and you don't want that. Jesus says it's what's on the inside, not what's on the outside. Which leads me to observation number 3. We said, hey, listen, we need to look at ourselves. We need to have some reflection. And we don't need to reflect on our behavior. We need to reflect on what's going on in the heart. And then thirdly, Jesus doesn't want behavior modification. Look, listen, I need everyone look up here. Everyone stop. If you're writing, don't stop. Look, okay, listen. Jesus doesn't want good citizens. Jesus wants sold out followers. Did you hear me? Yeah. Jesus doesn't want good citizens who work, pay their taxes, and are nice to their neighbors. He wants followers who are sold out to him. Jesus doesn't want behavior modification. He desires heart transformation. Matter of fact, after he tells this kind of parable about the speck and the eye, Jesus goes on in the parable of the Sermon on the Mount as he's talking to people. He talks about 4 main things, and all of them are relational. He talks about murder. He talks about adultery. He talks about greed, and he talks about pride. And in all of them, Jesus says, I don't want behavior modification. I don't want you to be a good citizen. I want you to be changed from the inside out. Because whatever's on the inside eventually will come on the outside. Listen, we're going to put this up there. Jesus wants more than you and I to just not murder. I didn't murder anyone today, Matt. Hey, great job. If that is your highest standard, that is broken. Jesus doesn't want us just to not murder. Jesus says, you shouldn't hate your brother or sister. Once you get angry, you need to let it go. Even little kids get it. Let it go, right? Jesus says, listen, I don't want you to just not murder people, but you're to not hate your brother, your sister. You're to love your enemy. You're to forgive people. The reason you need to forgive people, the reason you need to not hate people is because someday you're going to do something wrong and someone should hate you or be angry, but you're going to want them to love you and you're going to want them to forgive you. You should do unto your neighbor as you want done unto your... So Jesus raises the bar. He doesn't want behavior modification. He doesn't want you to go out and go, I'm not going to murder anybody, so I'm a great follower. He goes, no. I want you to love your neighbor. You're not to hate people. You're to forgive. It's just not don't commit adultery. Jesus says if you look at a person to objectify their body parts for sexual pleasure, that's lust. Don't have lust. Be faithful. You go, I haven't cheated on my spouse physically. Did you look at porn? Are you looking at people and objectifying their body parts? Because what's on the inside will always show up on the outside. Jesus doesn't want behavior modification. He wants heart transformation. He wants you to be faithful and love God first, and then to love your spouse and to love other people, to see them with human dignity. He says, don't just be not greedy. Don't be greedy. He wants more than that. He says, be generous. As he addresses greed, he says, listen, you shouldn't break the law. You shouldn't cheat people. You shouldn't avoid things. You should always be truthful and honest and upfront. Don't be greedy. But he says, you need more than that. Your heart should be generous. When you see people who are in genuine need, who are genuinely hurting, if you're able to help, you should help. You should have a heart of generosity, because what's on the inside will always show up on the... He says, listen, you need to be more than just don't be prideful. We need to be compassionate and humble. We need to see ourselves as people who are just as broken as the people around us. The last time I checked, grace was free. God doesn't love us because we were born, in the right country, or we went to the right church, or we voted for the right party, or whatever. You and I are loved and forgiven because of what Jesus did on the cross. I want to give you a little example of what Jesus means when he says, listen, I don't want behavior modification, I want heart transformation. I'm starting to come down with a little bit of cold. Anybody gotten that kind of pre-fall, like kids back to school? The bugs go around. Once you send your kid to schoschool, everyone passes it around, and so everyone's sick in the first month, right? And so anyway, listen, when you get a cold or a flu, have you ever gone to the little pharmacy store and you look for cold and flu medicine? And here's what I discovered about cold and flu medicine. They don't actually cure anything. The cold and flu medicine just drugs you enough that you don't feel the symptoms of the cause, right? They just mask the symptoms. They don't fix the cause. And you know what? That's what religion does. Religion attempts to mask the symptoms of what's broken on the inside. We do behavior modification. Jesus says, I don't want religion. I don't want you to take cold medicine for your soul and for your heart. I want the cure. I am the cure. I want something to change in your heart. That's why we're not about religion here at SouthPoint. We're about a relationship. See, here's what I've discovered. This is my opinion. I believe it to be true. You're more than willing to disagree with me, but I believe this to be true. The only thing that I've found that is powerful enough to change a broken human heart is the unconditional, unfailing love of God found in a person named Jesus. Matter of fact, I like what Titus says. We're going to put it up here on the screen. Titus 3. It says, once we too were foolish and disobedient. Listen, I'm not innocent. I'm not perfect. I've messed all this stuff. We once too were foolish and disobedient. We were misled and we became slaves to the many lusts and pleasures. Our lives were full of evil and envy, and we hated each other. We were living life, hooray for me and to the heck with. Right? We were all like that until when God our Savior revealed his what? Kindness and... See, here's what I discovered. People aren't changed by us trying to complain and control them. The human heart is changed when it's unconditionally loved. When the kindness and love of God, he saved us not because of the righteous things we had done, but because of his... See, it is the unfailing and unconditional love of God that has the power to transform a human heart, where you and I aren't into behavior modification and religiosity, which are just trying to cover up the symptoms. No. It's where our relationship, where God is the most important thing, and it redefines how we address everything around us. Because what's on the inside will always show up on the outside. And when we look to ourselves first, it's not the outside things, it's our heart. Which leads us kind of the summation of this whole message of what Jesus is trying to say. He says, a moment of reflection can create more change than a lifetime of deflection. A single moment where we look at ourselves and go, am I part of the problem? A moment of reflection on the inside can do more than a lifetime of saying, man, look how busted and how broken the world is. They need Jesus. I'm glad I'm awesome. I need to find me a perfect church where the pastor doesn't joke about cussing. And if you find a perfect church, leave because you'll mess it up. There are no perfect churches. We're just broken people following Jesus. So I'm going to put a picture up here. I'm going to kind of close with this. This is a picture of a window, and this is a picture of a mirror. And the reason I have this up on the screen, a picture of a window and a picture of a mirror, because I think this has a lot to do with how we view life. Many of us view life through the window. And what I mean by we view life through the window is we sit in the safety or comfort of our lives, and we look out the world, and we look out through the world through this window. And when we see something we don't like, we knock on the window. Knock, 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 knock. And we go, look at you, and we wave our finger, and we shake our head. And when that doesn't work, when we see something we don't like, we open the window of our life, and we begin to yell, hey, stop that. You're bothering me. I don't like that. And we yell and we complain and we look out the window of our lives and we say, man, you look at how bad and busted. Change. What is wrong with you? But here's what I've discovered. All the yelling, all the complaining, all the manipulation, all the whatever it is we do, yelling out the window, never, ever works. Trying to complain and control people into what you want them to do, I've discovered just is a waste of my time. It's a waste of your time, and it never accomplishes what we want. But the truth is, many of us are living a life where we're always looking out the window. Mirror. A mirror is something that you and I look at every day, right? Before you go to the office, before you go get your Starbucks, before you go do whatever it is you're going to do, you look in the mirror, and there's a reason why you look in the mirror is because you can't see yourself with your eyes. You can only see parts of you, but you look in the mirror because you want to make sure you don't have like a hanger or something in your tooth, right? Like the reason you look in the mirror is because you know there might be something that's not right, and you want to see it before you go out in public, right? You take a moment to look into the mirror to reflect on how you look before you step out in the world. And there's some of us in this room that live a life where we look at the mirror. And we stop to take a moment, but before we even look out the window, I'm going to look in the mirror and make sure what is going on the inside of me. I was thinking about this. Think about some of the people that have, in the last couple hundred years, that have created significant change in a world. William Wilberforce. He was in the English Parliament. And instead of yelling out the window at how bad the world, he became a follower of Jesus, and he took a moment of reflection, and he realized the atrocity of the slave trade. And in a moment of reflection, it created a lifetime of change. Think about Chuck Colson. Got put in prison for the Watergate issue. And he could have looked out the window and said, look at politics, look at our system, it's all broken, and I was the fall guy, and he could have placed all the blame. But in a moment of reflection, he became a follower of Christ, and he started some ministry called the Angel Tree Ministry that ministered to inmates in jail. A moment of reflection created a lifetime of change. Mother Teresa, when she was in Calcutta, as she saw the dying and the sick and the infirmed just thrown out in the street like they were garbage, she could have looked out of the window and said, what's wrong with you people? Instead, she took a moment to reflect and said, what is it that I can do? And she changed the world. You think of Bono. He went and did a concert, the AIDS conference in Africa. And he could have looked out the window and said, what's wrong with the world? That the world in America is so plenty, and over here it's so bad, and people are done. He could have looked out and said, what's wrong with you? But instead he took a moment to reflect, and he started the Red campaign, and he's been trying to change lives. We can create more change in a moment of reflection than we can in a lifetime of deflection. Imagine if those of us here, instead of trying to be good citizens, actually became full out disciples and followers of Jesus, where instead of spending all of our time looking out and yelling, why aren't you doing it right? We looked in the mirror and we said, God, what is it that you want to do in my life? Because I promised you, if each and every one of us in this room took time and said, God, what is it that you want to do in my life? Change me. Before we yelled out the window, we would turn our community upside down for Jesus. So our hope and our prayer is that none of us will have a cloudy view of life and go out and create harm and damage, but that we'd listen to the instructions that Jesus gave us instead of focusing on the outside to look and change what's on the inside. Let me pray. Heavenly Father, thank you. Thank you that you love us. Thank you that you don't want to just give us cold medicine. You just want to give us religion to mask the brokenness, the outside behaviors. Thank you, God, that you loved us enough and you paid the fullest price of sending your son for the cure so that we wouldn't just experience outside change, but we could experience heart change from the inside out. God, help us to have a moment of reflection where we look at ourselves before we seek to change what is around us, so that we become who you meant for us to be. This is our hope and our prayer. In Jesus' name, amen.
If you're ready to take the next step in your spiritual journey or continue to support SouthPoint, you can connect to a small group, serve on a team, and give financially by clicking the box on the right. To watch other sermons from SouthPoint Church, click the playlist on the left. Click the logo to subscribe.